Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is the Deathnote Live Action Episode 1. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So this episode is the longest in the series, and it starts with Light attending a Ichigo Berry concert with his friend, who happens to be a huge fan of the lead singer, who is Misa Misa. And then we see after the concert that Light heads to his part-time job alongside his friend. And once there, they do encounter a bully from high school who claims to have been studying out of the country, but in fact was in jail because he was a bully and part of a criminal element. And then as they leave the restaurant, the friend, because he is wealthy, is attacked, or, well, they're almost run over by a motorcycle, and then the friends basically threaten to bring 300,000 yen to this bully the next day, or else. And then Light tries to stand up for his friend, but ultimately is the weaker party as the other guy pulls out a knife, and that ends up poorly for him. But as they're walking around, or walking away, and they've separated, Light finds that the notebook falls behind him. He hears it hit the ground. He goes back, he picks it up, he takes it home, he looks at it, and he sits there and he wonders, what to do? This bully has attacked my friend, has threatened my friend. Let's just test this out. Puts down the bully's name. However, he then gets cold feet and tries to erase it, but finds that the name doesn't erase. He even tries scratching it out, but ultimately we do see that the notebook has been used and death happens. Light then hears about the fact that the bully died in an accident when the police returned the phone that the bully had stolen from him to his house. And he's like, oh, well, it was supposed to be a heart attack. It was an accident, so it wasn't actually me. But he goes to the funeral anyways, just to kind of case the land or whatever, and discovers that actually what caused the accident was a heart attack while he was driving his motorcycle, which led to him not stopping when a train was passing by, and then he ended up getting run over by a train. And this is where Light realizes that the notebook most likely is real, and he has a bit of a freak out about how he's just killed somebody. But then his friend also attends the funeral and is scolded by another guy for being happy. And then the friend shows like basically some internet posts about how there's a lot of people who are happy that this bully is gone because he was a criminal element and he had made a lot of people suffer. And this is when Light realizes that, good people, well, not necessarily good people, but the people who are the victims of a person, when that person dies, tend to feel a load off because they know that they will never be in danger of this person again. And then we move on to the detective meeting where we meet Surichiro and all of the other detectives, and they're just having a standard meeting about regular crime. Kira's not known yet. But we do get like a flashback to when Soichiro was catching a particular criminal who is getting released on probation, or anyways, they're out of jail now, and we get a flashback to how this was the criminal that he was trying to catch when his wife was ill. He ignored calls from Light to catch this criminal, prioritizing his job over his family, which ultimately led to him missing his wife's passing and ending up in the hospital room after the fact to be yelled at by Light, and is also the reason why Light in this version does not want to be a detective or to be a police officer, because that job has negatively impacted him by his father choosing that job over the family and missing the death of the mother. We then have Suichiro returning home, and we see that it's very awkward between father and son, when Suichiro goes up to check on him, and they have a stilted conversation. Light begins to ask a moral question about murder, but then backs off of it, and ultimately they then part ways. Then the next day, there is a bit of a standoff between Soichiro and this criminal who had, when he was arrested, promised to kill him. The criminal has taken hostages. And so when he arrives, Soichiro then replaces one of the hostages and like the child hostage and is brought in. Light is called into the station where Sayu already is. Sayu then yells at the room of cops, "Why don't you just kill this guy already so nobody else has to die?" Which then reminds Light that at home he happens to have a notebook that can kill this guy before anybody else has to die. So he runs out, he runs home, and we then do see some of Soichiro being held hostage and talking to the criminal element. However, then Light does use the notebook again, and he watches the news and hears a gunshot on the news, but then Soichiro walks out and reveals that the killer died of a heart attack, and the gunshot was him in his pain shooting at the ceiling by accident because he clenched due to the pain of the heart attack. And this is when Ryuk arrives, and Light has a bit of a freak out. He hides under the table. When that doesn't work, because Ryuk can still see him under the table, he then decides to run out of the house, along the street to some building that he has access to the roof of, and then goes to the roof and throws the book over the roof. But Ryuk, of course, can fly and follows him and brings the book back and explains more about the book, how, he's not going to kill him, no reason to rush to your death, which is what Light feared. And that, the consequences to the book are basically you have the terror and agony of somebody who is keeping the notebook a secret, and then you also have the fact that you cannot go to heaven or hell. That is when Elle starts to get involved. So we have Watari and Elle at a crime scene in England where an English criminal has died, because Kira does not focuses mostly on Japan, but he does kill criminals in other countries as well. And then we start to see that there are multiple deaths as Light writes names, and the investigations start to ramp up as people in the police, at the meetings, and people in the streets, and so on everywhere, start to notice that somebody is killing heinous criminals by heart attacks, and there's just too many for it not to be a coincidence. And all of the investigations and everybody starts to take notice, including people in the streets where they create fan sites and the like. Then we have another scene with Misa where she's in a meeting with Mikami, who is involved with her parents' case, and she finds out that the person who killed her parents when she was young is getting paroled and is very upset about it. We then get the TV broadcast where Linda L. Taylor basically challenges Light to an ego battle, of who can catch each other first. Light gets provoked, kills Lindell Taylor. Elle reveals, haha, that was a stand-in. Guess what I found out about you from this? And you don't need to turn yourself in, but I'm gonna find you, and you can try to find me too. And basically, they're now challenged officially to their battle. Suichiro, who's at the police station, is obviously put off by the fact that Elle was willing to kill a person, even if it was a criminal scheduled for execution. He still used somebody's life as a game piece. He's upset about this. He admonishes Elle, and Elle then decides that he's going to give them the profile of Kira to kind of appease him, that he's figured out based on this whole situation. And then Light comes to drop off some clothes for his father, who's been sleeping at the police station instead of at home, and Matsuda comes out to gather them for Soichiro and lets slip that, hey, L, this amazing famous detective, is helping us, and he thinks Kira might be a student, and I can't give you too much information, but here's just enough for you to make your next moves with, essentially. And so then Light counters by making his next move by starting to kill people by setting the death as heart attack, but changing the time of death according to the rules of the notebook in order to allow him to defeat the rap of being a student because he does not want them to know he's a student. And then L agrees to meet with Soichiro once his profile is called into question because of this, and specifies he'll only meet Soichiro. We then see that Light kills Misa's family's killer as he's getting let out of the jail. Soichiro goes to meet L and meets Watari as well, and learns about what L thinks about everything, and that he's also investigating many of the police officers' family because there's definitely a leak because of the student thing. Ryuk then at another concert for Misa while Light's waiting outside, reveals to Light that he's being followed by Ray Pember. He then attends another concert, while we also then at the very end see Nier talking to a mellow puppet about the investigation. So now we come to the part of the episode where we rank the episode, and as always we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score. And it's mostly objective because while I keep out personal preferences and most of the emotion, it can include bias and judgment. And then the personal rankings is where more the emotional response to the episode, the preferences, and my own personal opinions play into the score and determine the score of the episode. So we'll start with the mostly objective rank values. And first we have some single episode supporting character introductions. And these were a couple of this is basically the first and second kill. So the first kill was Sakota, who was a big bully to one of Light's friends in school and had gone to prison. Now he's come back and he's bullying him again. And Light, of course, hates this. And then when the bully leaves, we see the friend kind of terrified and asking Light, like, what should he do? He doesn't think he can keep like going like this again now that he's back. Like, he is getting over the bullying. Now it's here again. And then, of course, Light picks up the book, goes home, and just is like, you know what? Delete you. And then he immediately has a uh-oh moment of like, this is a bad thing to do. Tries to undo it, fails miserably. But Sakota is the first victim and is a bully to his friend. And then the other one is Odaharada Kuro, who is the criminal that Soichiro was hunting when his wife got ill, and he had just arrested him when he's informed by Mogi that, he's being called to the hospital and that they can take over from here, but ultimately Soichiro decides not to go to the hospital, says that can wait, and prioritizes booking in and interviewing Otoharada instead, which ultimately ends with him missing his wife's passing and, getting the admonishment and strained relationship with his son. But then he ends up paroled, which Suichiro then takes responsibility for because he was not in the best headspace during, his arrest of Otoharada, and so he believes that the parole is somehow his fault, or at least that's what's mentioned when Mogi's retelling this history to Aizawa and Matsuda, I believe it is that he's talking to. And so that's why he goes there, that's why he offers himself up as a hostage. And Otoharada, when he was being brought in, also threatened that he was going to for sure kill Soichiro at some point, like really kill him, stressing, like kill the heck out of him. His words, not mine. So he was very determined about that, and that's why he accepted the hostage switch. But luckily, he takes some time to, have his villain monologues, which gives Light time to run from the police station all the way back to the house, go through the trash, pause to reread the rules of the notebook just to make sure, and then eventually calm his shaking hand and write out the name, which that makes this the second victim, and also the one where he fully and firmly realizes what he has in his hands. And they're each worth 1 point because they were only single episodes. Then we have the multi-episode supporting character introductions. And this we have Masaru Kamoda, who is Light's best friend, the one that he went to the concerts with, the one that he was at his part-time job talking with, and then also who comes to his classes at the university or college as well. Then we have his younger sister, of course, Seiyu Yagami, Soichiro Yagami. We get Watari. We then have our main detectives that are going to be part of the task force. We have Tota Matsuda. We have Kanzo Mogi, Shuichi Aizawa, and then a female detective, which wasn't in the original anime that they've added, which is Shoko Himura. We also get to meet Terumikami early because he is the one who is working on Misa's parents' case and is the one who has to inform her that the killer is getting out on parole. And so we get to see him early. Ray Pember is told to Light at the end of the episode that he's following him, and L, when he meets Suichiro, also shows him a screen where he indicates that there are FBI agents investigating the families of police officers to find out who the leak was about the fact that that Kira was suspected to be a student. And then there's also Ogiso. I don't know the first name, but this is the chief or the person who is Suichiro's boss, who keeps kind of taking credit for Suichiro's work and is kind of a schmoozer rather than a talented individual. At least that's the impression that we're left with as viewers. But all of them are worth 3 points, and so I think you can tell where this episode's score is going. We then also have the multi-episode main character introductions, which of course is Light Yagami, L, who will use the alias Ryuga in this one. I think in the anime it was Ryuzaki, but I'm pretty sure in this one it's Ryuga. And then Misa Amane, Ryuk, and then Nier. And I'm counting him as a main character introduction because they brought him in early. Oh, sorry, she. This is going to be hard because they swapped the character, and swaps are hard. But, sorry, they brought her in at the end with the mellow puppet, and I think she will be part of the investigation more so than she was in the original, which again is a change that I appreciate because the errors came out of left field in the anime, and I didn't really enjoy part two, partially because of that. So I do like that they brought her in earlier. And they're all worth 4 points. And then we have, of course, the world building, which is the existence of Shinigami, existence of the notebook's initial rules, the fact that once you've written a name, you cannot erase it. Even crossing it out didn't work. I think in the anime you could cross out if you crossed out soon enough. Like you could cross out a name, but here, nope. He tries erasing, he tries scratching out Sakota's name, but it does not work. He does die anyways of a heart attack. So we get those world building pieces, also all worth 4 points. We're well above 10 at this point. I didn't think that there were any negatives in this episode, therefore it is a 10 out of 10 episode. Bringing us now to the live action ranking so far on our mostly objective ranking, and these episodes unfortunately are not named anything specific, so they're just numbered. Therefore, in first place so far, we currently have the first episode, episode 1, So this adaptation is the 2015 live action drama series that was made in Japan, and I have to say that their casting was really well done. I thought Light is a believable Light. He even has like the lighter brown hair. And then L was a believable L. And I love how they made L a little bit more, he doesn't wear like a sweatshirt and jeans and bare feet. He's, wearing some nice loafers and a nice button-down shirt, and it's all white and clean. They did give him like a quirk of being kind of um against dirt. What is that called? Oh my goodness. There is a term for it when people don't like dirt. What is it? Misophobic? No, 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 I don't know. Give me a moment, I'm gonna look it up. I actually was right. Mesophobia or germophobia, either one. And they kind of give Light that. There's also some pretty obvious product placement in these like squeezy juice packets that he keeps eating instead of the sugar, but he does also get served tea with like cookies and stuff, so it's not entirely wiped out the sweet tooth that he has, but they do very much show on multiple occasions him eating these little packets. Oh, not juice, gel, because he gets some gel on his sleeve, and Watari's like, oh goodness, and he's like, oh goodness, and then they remove his shirt and put on a new one. So, like I said, the mesophobia has been added in. When Suichiro goes to visit him, he gets sprayed with disinfectant because Elle's sensitive in many ways, apparently, according to Watari. So I think that's great. They've expanded on his character, but I think that they really made it interesting. And like in the original anime, they often, had Elle shadowed in the beginning early scenes, and they kind of did that with this one too by him wearing like a hood, and the hood was too big for him, so it covered half his face. Now, on the one hand, I'm like, I get what you were trying to do. On the other hand, people don't wear hoods covering like half their face just normally and inside. Like, I feel like maybe if it was raining or something, they'd pull the hood down, but most people, when they're walking or something, or like indoors, either have their hoods off or up, but they do pick a dramatic time to show it. And I think they got the hair right with like the messiness of the hair. They put on like eyeliner to like mimic the eye bags. So they actually kept a lot of the hallmarks of the character, which I enjoyed. Light, similarly, I really did enjoy the fact that they cast really well. Light as well, I felt. He has the lighter brown hair instead of um, black hair, and he has really good cheekbones, I have to say. He has great cheekbones. Um, but I also like what they did with his character, where because of, well, it's unfortunate that they did kill his mother off before the series started, but by killing his mother off, he then no longer wants to be a police officer because his father prioritized being a police officer and missed their mother's dying, and that traumatized him as a kid. So it makes sense now that he's going to step out of the traditional justice into his own type of justice. Whereas in like the original anime, he wanted to be a police officer, which meant he had some belief in that system, and yet then he steps out of that system and works against it in order to kill all the criminals. And it's like, but that was your dream to be part of that. Whereas now it's like a little bit, it makes a little bit more sense because he's lost faith in that system. That's why he no longer wants to be a police officer like his father because of what happened when his mom died. And so he's now stepping out of that traditional framework of justice into his own path of justice. And that to me makes a lot more sense with this backstory. Additionally, he's he's smart because his friend does specifically note that he scores better than him on tests and such, and that him going into like a public service job would be a waste. But at the same time, Light himself wants an easy life without obstacles, and he just wants the job security and to just coast. That's his goal. He just wants to coast. He just wants to exist. And they give him like a part-time job as well, where he's kind of making his way on his own, getting his own funds separately, like being a very independent person. I like these aspects of it because it also then, if he is average as a person, not a genius, it makes his mistakes a little bit more understandable. Whereas, like, with a genius, you have expectations of geniusness, of smartness, of strategy and planning and foresight to be able to think ahead on your plan and the consequences and then choose the better path. Whereas, like, if you're an average person, you don't necessarily do that on the daily, and therefore, when you don't do that and you end up messing up, it makes more sense. I also think that it is like in the original, Misa was like a complete blindside. He had no idea who she was. In this one, Misa is one, a little bit more likable. She doesn't come off as dumb as she did in the anime, which is good. Additionally, we get more of her backstory to make her less of a fan service character and more of an actual character. And additionally, Light knows who she is, goes to her concerts with his friend who is the super fan. He's more like tagging along with his friend, but he enjoys them. He knows who she is. When he finds out about the fact that, her family was killed, he makes a special point to go look up the killer and get rid of him. So in this case, he's actually doing it on purpose. And, when she does show up, if she does show up, he will actually know who she is and already have positive feelings. So I think it takes away some of the negativity from the anime about the fact that she was forcing feelings on someone who did not even know or care about her. At least he does know and care at this point. So when she goes and like tries to force those feelings, at least it'll make sense. Or they may even redo it. I can't remember if they do or not, but they may even redo it where the feelings aren't forced because he has those affections already. I did think that some of these scenes were comically overacted, and that is not a negative, not necessarily a positive though, but not a negative. Example, the dramatic writing scenes. He, of course, the first time he uses it to kill, he's mad from the bully, so he goes home and he just writes it like huge half across the page, and it's like, wow, you've wasted half a page and you don't even believe in this. But I love how they like zoom in on the pencil and like him clicking out a little bit of lead. Likewise, when he's going to save his father from that killer, he like literally grabs his wrist because it's shaking so hard. And then, click, 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 and then like digging into that page like it's gonna break through. And it's just like absolutely hilariously overacted. When Rook surprises him and he's like under the table. Oh, wait, I can still be seen under the table. Let's run across town into a building I somehow have roof access for, and then throw this book off the roof. Like, not only is that just a bit ridiculous, but it's also hilarious. And then Rick comes in and is like, dude, I'm not going to kill you. No reason to race to your death or anything. Just so you know, here's some consequences. Like, you're allowed to use it however you want. Like, I'm just possessing you for a while. And that, of course, is funny. But even that, like, was a great scene. It was funny. Nier at the end is brought in sooner, which I prefer to the original because one of my biggest gripes about part two was that we had these random errors we never knew anything about coming in after Elle died with an advantage, getting 3 years to move in the shadows and plan ahead before eventually confronting Kira. And it's like, no wonder they won. They had all the advantages. Like, you stacked the freaking team. So that wasn't really fair fight. And also, I had no reason to care about them at all because like they just randomly were brought in part two, and it's like you spent the entire first 37 episodes getting me attached to Elle and Light and their game of cat and mouse, and now you're just throwing in the last 11 episodes these random two people that we don't even know anything about. Like, it just didn't sit well with me. Whereas this, they brought him in right away, and I always thought the Mellow Puppet was kind of creepy, but then I remembered that having just rewatched it now, that Nier also wore a creepy mask of Elle in the anime, so it kind of tracks for his character to have a creepy puppet of Mello instead of casting somebody as Mello. And additional to that, it's also keeps his toy thing in because now he has a puppet. So instead of having to give him a bunch of extra toys, they can just have him, he has a toy that's a puppet of Mello and is doing the voices. They did swap Nier to be, I think, a little girl instead of a boy, which I don't think that added anything to the character, but then we didn't get a lot of the character in part two of the anime anyways. Like, he was mostly scenes of him playing and then just voicing his thoughts on Kira and the Kira case. So I don't think it necessarily negatively impacts the character, but I am never a fan of swapping in any capacity for characters. So wasn't a huge fan of that. But at the same time, I don't think it necessarily ruins anything because of the fact that Nier's gender didn't really necessarily have an impact on the actions or thoughts of the character in the original either, because he was just kind of off to the side. And let me see, were there any other points? Now, this episode was basically just speedrunning all the setup and the start of the game, the like opening challenge, and then the rest of the episodes are going to be the actual battles. And I think, if I recall correctly, this series has a more satisfying to me ending. But either way, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the casting. I think the changes that they made actually improved the story, which is why I don't have a problem with them making these changes, as I do in many other cases where they make changes that either don't have an impact on the story or make it worse. In these cases, it actually makes it better because it it makes it make more sense and some of the impacts more forgivable. And like I said, I like the casting of both Light and L, and I think that that is great. So overall, I really, really, really enjoy this episode and this series, and in fact decided to give it a 10 out of 10 for the first episode because it was a longer episode, but I think it draws you in to keep watching. And like I said, it made improvements to the original anime, and it also condenses the story a bit, so it cuts out some of the more boring parts. So ultimately, 10 out of 10. That puts it in our personal ranking as first place episode 1. Unfortunately, the episodes are unnamed, so, which I think I mentioned before as well. The episodes don't have names to them, so it is just episode 1 is now in first place currently. Now we come to the series ranking so far, and on our mostly objective ranking, part 1 of the anime ended at 70.77%, part 2 at 51.82%, and the live action is so far starting strong with a 10 out of 110 episode. On the personal ranking, part 1 was worth 60.38%, part 2 is at 49.09%, and then the live action also got a 10 out of 110 points for this first episode. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Deathnote Live Action Episode 1. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.